All right, let's talk about Utah's 2024 college football season. Good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. That's right, it is me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you're not already. I post pointless, barely watchable college football videos almost every single day of the year. We do live streams, game streams, and reactions, call-in shows twice a week. We have a really good time here. Hit the subscribe button if you're new. We'd love to have you. All right, Utah 2024. I'm doing, of course, a whole series of these preview and prediction videos. I've done 6 or 7 of them, I think, so far. Big 12 team up today in Utah. Shout out to Carrie T over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. They suggested I do this Utah preview and prediction video. So, Carrie, I hope you enjoy the video. This one's for you. If you're a member of the Uncle Lou Patreon page, make sure you head over there. You'll see the first post on the page is about these prediction videos. Leave a comment. Let me know what team it is you want me to do. Every day when I sit down and get ready to do these videos, that's the first thing I do is head over to the Patreon page, scroll through the list, and just pick a team off of there. So here we go with Utah. Let's wrap up last year for Utah. The story for Utah last year, really injuries, right? Now, most notably quarterback Cam Rising, but they had a whole string of injuries on both sides of the ball that really kind of derailed their season from the very beginning before it ever really even got started. Cam Rising, for instance, never played a game. It seemed like he was coming back next week, every single week of the season last year, until around the last month or so when it was finally announced that he was just going to sit out the entire season. He's back. We'll get to that in a second. But the star tight end was out. There was a running back was out. They had injuries all over the place on the defense. It was just a mess of a season for Utah and Kyle Whittingham. They ended up going 8-4, which is respectable, but not up to the standards of what Utah is used to doing, at least not in the last few years. Of course, they were coming off back-to-back Pac-12 titles. Failed to even make it to the Pac-12 title game last year. But they did go 8-4, finished 8-5 after a bowl game, lost to who'd they lose to? Northwestern, I believe it was, and 5-4 in conference in the last year of the Pac-12. They finished 6th in the last year of the Pac-12. Of course, they're on to the Big 12 now with the Pac-12 no longer existing. Offensive struggles, of course, like I mentioned, were the story of the season. And although they played well on defense, not really as good as we're used to seeing. It was more the offensive side of the ball where it was really obvious that Utah was struggling last year. They had 8 games where they scored less than 25 points. That's not good, especially in today's age of college football. If you go and you look at a lot of the really good teams in college football, they're well into the 30s, low 40s usually is where you see your top offenses. To score less than 24 points in way over half your games, obviously not good. They had games where they scored 14, 7, 6, 18, 7. That's 5 games right there under 19 points. Again, 8 games under 25. Just not good. Recruiting-wise, this is sort of the base of a team, right? The talent base. How, potential, how good of a roster do they have? You go back and you look at the recruiting classes. And, of course, now in the age of the transfer portal, and the players' abilities to kind of bounce from team to team, you have to look at transfer classes as well. And look, as much as I love Kyle Whittingham, and I do, I think he's one of the best coaches in college football. I think he's one of those coaches. This is an expression you hear a lot. Sometimes it's not really warranted. I think in Kyle Whittingham's case, it is. But he gets the absolute most out of the talent he has on the roster. Now, I get it that it's Utah. They're not a traditional powerhouse. They're not a blue blood. So maybe they have a few built-in recruiting disadvantages as opposed to some of the other big schools. But I still feel like a head coach, especially in today's world of college football, the primary job of a head coach, I feel like, is to acquire talent. Now, forever that was through recruiting. And again, I still feel like that's the way to build the foundation of a team is through high school recruiting. But you also have the transfer portal now. And this is one area where, and this always causes a lot of argument and debate among college football fans, is recruiting a part of coaching? Like, you'll see a lot of here's the top 10 coaches in college football or something. And it'll be, like for a long time, you'd see Nick Saban on the list, Kirby Smart, whatever these coaches like that. And then you'd always have pushback from some people in the comments that would go, well, it's not that they're good coaches. They just have all the best players. Well, getting the best players is part of being a coach. Now, I understand development and scheme and philosophy and off-season programs and everything that goes into building a program is important. I understand that. But without a base level of talent, the rest of that stuff is kind of rendered meaningless. Utah's been a really good program. They've won 10 or more games multiple times. They've won multiple Pac-12 titles. They've been to New Year's Six Bowls. They've won New Year's Six Bowls. They never made a 4-team playoff, but they're one of the most consistently good teams in America. I still feel like if they could increase their overall talent level, it would give them a much better chance at doing something beyond that. Now, we go to a 12-team playoff this year, and I'm going to talk in a minute about how I feel about Utah's chances of getting into a 12-team playoff, and then how I feel about Utah's chances in any given year, or this year specifically, winning a 12-team playoff. I think those are two different conversations, but we'll talk about that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like if you're a Utah fan and you want Utah to take the next step or go to the next level, which would be what? Major postseason play, playoffs, right? I feel like the talent level is going to have to increase if you want to succeed there. Now, we're at a 12-team playoff now. Again, we'll see if I think Utah can get there with what they have. But anyway, let's move along. I don't want to get kind of too bogged down on that. Transfer portal. Recruiting. So they signed the 59th best recruiting class in the country this past year. But that's pretty bad, even by Utah standards. If you look at the year before that, they signed the 20th ranked class. The year before that, 34th. Year before that, 35th. And that tends to be where they fall in most given years, the 20 to 40 range. This past cycle, 59th. That's just not good. Again, I understand, it's Utah. They don't have this advantage or that advantage. They're not believe me, I get all that. I understand all that. I still find it hard to believe that anybody would find the 59th best recruiting class acceptable. They did supplement that through the transfer portal. They had the 34th highest rated portal class. They brought in 12 transfers. So that's about average. The year before, they had the 44th ranked portal class. They brought in 8 transfers. So they are a program that has embraced the portal and has used the portal to fill needs or perceived needs or fill holes on the roster, whatever the case. They're not Colorado. They're not flipping their entire roster over every single year and bringing in 50 plus transfers. They're also not Clemson, where they just stick their head in the sand and believe the portal doesn't exist. They use the portal about like I think teams should use the portal. Fill holes, fill gaps, supplement the roster, that kind of thing. Returning production. What's coming back from last year's team? Well, they got a lot coming back. And when you add back on top of the returning production, the injured players that didn't play last year that are now back, Utah could be set up for a pretty good year. They return 75% of their offensive production and 70% of their defensive production. So they're 16th overall in the country in terms of returning production from last year. Again, you add Cam Rising to that, who didn't play last year. You add that tight end, Brent Queeth, is that his name? They have a running back that was out. You add all those pieces back in on top of offensively the 75% that's returning. And it looks like Utah would be set up pretty good in terms of an offense for 2024. Who's a better coach, Kyle Whittingham or Gundy at Oklahoma State? I'm just asking. I've done my coaching ranking videos, and the only reason I'm bringing that up now is because that's one of the most heated debates that has come out of all of those coaching ranking videos that I did. Now, nobody ever agrees with anybody's list of anything, nor do I expect anybody to agree with mine, and there are disagreements and arguments in the comment section of any top 10 anything video anybody ever makes, myself included. But that one sticks out. There was heated debates, good points made back and forth between Gundy and Whittingham. I had Whittingham higher than Gundy. In other words, a better coach than Gundy. But there was a lot of people in the comment section who were making some very good points in support of having Gundy ahead of Whittingham. Now, I'm pretty sure Utah fans are going to side with Whittingham here, and Oklahoma State fans are going to side with Gundy here. But I'm curious what the rest of the college football world might think between those two coaches. There's a lot of similarities between the two and the programs that they're at. But I'm just curious what you think. If you want to let me know down below, who do you think is better between Whittingham and Gundy at Oklahoma State? Let's talk about Vegas and what they think Utah is going to do in 2024. Now, this isn't the end-all, be-all. No single information about a team or someone's opinion about a team is the end-all, be-all. The recruiting isn't the only thing that matters, but it matters a little bit when it goes into making predictions. The overall talent level on the roster, it's not all that matters, but it's a big part of it, right? The coaching staff and the continuity within that coaching staff. It's not the only thing that matters, but it matters. That's how I view these Vegas numbers. It's just sort of people who are willing to put their hard-earned money behind their opinion. How do they feel about certain teams? And when you look at Utah for 2024, the expected win total for them, the gambling number, 9.5. Again, that's a betting number. Of course, you can't win 9.5 games. So, if you think Utah is going to win more than 9.5 games, you bet over 9.5. And this is a regular season bet, so 12 games. So you're basically betting that Utah is going to go either 10-2, 11-1, or 12-0. If you think that's the case, you bet the over 9.5. If you think they're going to lose or win less than 9.5 games, then the opposite, right? You bet under 9.5. You think they're going to go 9-3. You think they're going to go 8-4 like they did last year, whatever the case. You'd bet under. This Vegas number moves up and down based on which side of it people bet on. If everybody starts betting over the 9.5, they'll bump the number up to 10 and then 10.5 until people start betting the under. Then they'll move it back down. So 9.5 right now is an indication of how many games the betting public expects Utah to win in 2024 in the regular season. How about their odds of winning the national title? Well, they've got the 17th best odds in the country of winning a national title at plus 6,000. That puts them in the same ballpark as teams like Oklahoma, Southern Cal, and Miami. So again, just an idea of what the betting public thinks about this team. Can they win the Big 12? Well, according to Vegas, they've got the best odds to do it. They're the favorite to win the new look Big 12 in their first year as a part of the Big 12. Their odds are plus 330. That puts them slightly ahead of Kansas State, who has the second best odds. Kansas, believe it or not, with the third best odds to win the Big 12. Unbelievable. And Arizona with the fourth best odds to win the Big 12. Mind-blowing that Kansas is good. We're going to talk about Kansas in one of these videos here sometime over the next couple of weeks. But Kansas expected to be pretty good. But Utah the favorite to win the Big 12 according to Vegas. All right, let's look at the offense and the defense. Then we're going to put the schedule up. Offense, Cam Rising. Now, he's got to stay healthy, but if it's the same Cam Rising we've seen play the last few years at Utah, then that is obviously a huge boost for this Utah offense. When I look at Cam Rising, it's not an exact comparison. It's just who he reminds me of recently in the world of college football is somebody like a Max Duggan at TCU a couple of years ago. And actually, TCU reminds me a lot of Utah. TCU, not a traditional powerhouse. They don't recruit in the top 10 or 15 every single year. They're never the most talented team in the country. But they had a coaching staff that particular year who was able to get the absolute most out of that roster. And they had a lot of veteran players in the two deep on that team, juniors and seniors. Utah is going to be in a very similar situation in 2024. And Max Duggan, he gave 100%, 110% on every single play. If you needed 4 yards and he was scrambling, you just knew he was going to find a way to get 4.5. And when you watch Cam Rising play, to me anyway, he's a very similar player to what we saw out of Max Duggan in 2022 when TCU made it all the way to the national title game. Not saying Utah is going to make it to the national title game, but I see a lot of Max Duggan in Cam Rising, but he's got to stay healthy. They also get potential All-American tight end back in Brent Queeth, who had an amazing year a couple of years ago. He was out all of last year. Didn't play at all. He'll be one of the best tight ends in the country, if healthy, this season. Transfer wide receiver from Southern Cal, who I believe was at Arizona before that. So this will be his third team. I think he was all Pac-12, I think, at Arizona a couple of years ago. Transferred to Southern Cal this past season. Now, here he is transferring again, this time to Utah. But wide receiver Dorian Singer. Now, whatever you think about Dorian Singer and the year he had last year at Southern Cal, this will be one of the most talented wide receivers Utah's ever had, period. They don't get the high-end sort of skill position talent that a Southern Cal gets year in and year out. So you might be a Southern Cal fan and you're looking at Dorian Singer going, well, he was our third best wide receiver, or whatever you think he was. I don't know. Maybe you think he was your best wide receiver. I don't know. I'm just as an example. But for somebody like Utah to get him, it's a lot like when South Carolina got Spencer Rattler from Oklahoma, right? Oklahoma lost Spencer Rattler. They didn't care. Like, they had Caleb Williams at the time. What did they care? We're losing Spencer Rattler. Who cares? We get a great quarterback every single year. It doesn't matter. South Carolina looked at it and went, oh my God, we got a 5-star quarterback. This is unbelievable. Like, they were happy as hell to have him. Same situation here with Dorian Singer. He's going to be one of the best, at least from a pure talent perspective, one of the best wide receivers Utah's had in a long, long time. Running back, another guy to get back this year that was out most of the year last year, Michael Bernard. He's back. Now, they lose a couple of key running backs from last year, but they've got a pretty solid running back room. And when you look over on the defensive side of the ball, this is where I almost don't question Utah at all year in and year out. They have a consistently really good defense year in and year out. Is it great? Is it ever the best defense in college football? No, but it is consistently one of the best 15 or 20 defenses in all of college football. They were 18th last year in points allowed per game. They only gave up 19 points per game last year. 8 starters returned from that defense last year, and again, getting some injured players back as well. And always a really good defense. Overall, Utah is one of the most well-coached and disciplined teams in the country. They rarely beat themselves. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They tend to take care of the ball for the most part. Just a very, very well-coached team. Again, a saying you hear all the time. A team like Utah, a coach like Kyle Whittingham, they get the absolute most out of the talent they have almost every single year. Here's the questions I have about Utah before we put the schedule up. Can they stay healthy? That's key all the time in college football. But it's one thing for a team like Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, Texas, Oklahoma, Michigan, whoever, these teams that recruit in the top 10 every single year, right? And have NFL players on the bench, future NFL players playing second and third string. It's one thing when they catch an injury somewhere, right? The guy the replacement that's going in is a potential NFL player down the road most of the time. At a place like Utah, where you're recruiting in the 30s, 40s, and 50s every single year, losing a starter becomes that much more of a big deal, in my opinion, because the likelihood of the backup being anywhere near as good as the starter just isn't the same as it is at some of those other schools. So clearly they've got to stay healthy, and that starts with Cam Rising, the tight end, all the players that were injured last year and are coming back. But just in general, on both sides of the ball, they've got to try to stay as healthy as they can. And is anything short of making the playoffs a disappointment? This is a question I have not really about the team itself, but maybe more for Utah fans specifically. Is anything short of making the playoffs this year acceptable to you? You've got a loaded team returning. On top of that, you get a lot of key players back who didn't play last year because they were injured. And you'll see when we look at the schedule here in a little bit, there's no real juggernauts. There's not really a game on this schedule that you look at and you go, there's no way Utah's winning that. They might not even be an underdog all year long. Is anything short of making the playoffs a disappointment? Now, I know that's a question that probably would never have been asked of Utah prior to this year, but going to a 12-team playoff, it's possible Utah could get in without even winning the Big 12. Now, obviously, if they win the Big 12, they're guaranteed to get in with one of the guaranteed spots there. But it's possible they don't even win the Big 12 and they still get in as one of the best 10 or 12 teams in the country at the end of that ranking deal when it comes out. Those are the questions I have. Let's put the schedule up on the screen. We're going to go through it game by game, and I'm going to try to give you a winner and a loser for every single week. All right, now things that jump out to me initially when I first look at this schedule here. The Thursday night game to start things off. Okay, great. You don't have a lot of great games that first Thursday. You put Utah on, I'll watch it. But then you get 10 days or 9 days instead of 7 to prepare for that next game against Baylor. And I don't think Baylor's a great team, but the point is any coach and any coaching staff will tell you we'd rather have 9 days than 7. So that's an obvious benefit there. Southern Utah, it is what it is. Don't try to tell me it's a rivalry because they're in the same state. Utah should have no problem with them. I see a back-to-back road games here, Utah State and Oklahoma State. Back-to-back road games always stick out to me because they can be potentially hazardous. A lot of times the better team can lose in a back-to-back road game situation. But one of these is Utah State. Again, a game that they should have no trouble with at all. Here's another thing that jumps out at me about this schedule. I mentioned the odds to win the Big 12 earlier in this video, right? Utah's the favorite to win the Big 12. Kansas State actually has the second best odds to win the Big 12. I don't see Kansas State anywhere on this schedule, so you avoid them in the regular season. The team with the third best odds to win the Big 12 this year, Kansas. I don't see them on this schedule anywhere either. So you're the favorite to win the Big 12, and you avoid the second and third favorites. You do play the fourth favorite to win the Big 12, which is Arizona, but you get them at home. As far as having difficult games in back-to-back weeks, this is where I potentially see some trouble for Utah. You might think Utah is better than Team A and better than Team B. But if Team A is pretty good and Team B is pretty good and you got to play them 2 weeks in a row, a lot of times you'll see a team slip up. And I see a couple of scenarios here where that could potentially happen. On the road at Oklahoma State and then home against Arizona. Those are both ranked teams, right? BYU, Colorado, and Iowa State and Central Florida, the last 4 games of the year in a row. BYU is a rivalry game, the Holy War. At Colorado, it'll be hyped up. I don't think Colorado's going to be very good, but it'll be a hyped up game. Iowa State, again, much like Utah, one of the best coached teams in the country every single year. Not extremely talented, but always very well coached. And then on the road at Central Florida, who I think could be a surprise team in the Big 12 this year. So those are a couple of stretches where you could have some trouble. All right, let's go through this thing game by game. I'm going to give you a winner and a loser for every single week. Southern Utah, Thursday night to kick off the season. You'll win. No problems there. Baylor, again, I think you will win. You get them at home. This was a weird game last year, a great game. I think Utah came back and beat them in the end after trailing for the majority of the game. But Baylor was not great last year. In fact, they were terrible. I'm expecting them to improve this year. I don't think they can improve enough to win on the road at Utah. I think you start out 2-0. On the road at Utah State. Yeah, it's on the road. Yes, an in-state game. It's a lower classification team. They don't stand a chance. Utah will start 3-0. Now it gets interesting here because these are 2 tough games. I think Oklahoma State and Central Florida, either or both, could make the Big 12 title game. I know they're not the favorites to win the Big 12. As mentioned, Utah's the favorite, followed by Kansas State, Kansas, and Arizona. Those are the top 4 teams in the Big 12 heading into the season, according to the Vegas odds. I really like Oklahoma State, and I really like Central Florida to surprise some people this year. Oklahoma State's got maybe the best running back in football, one of the best running backs for sure, best 5 or 6 running backs in Gordon. Got to keep him healthy. And Oklahoma State's defense has got to play a lot better than what it played last year, but you have to play them there. I think they beat you early in the year. I think you go on the road and catch an early loss to Oklahoma State, which is going to put Utah in a sort of backs against the wall type mentality for the remainder of the year. You come out of that, you play Arizona at home, a surprisingly good 10-win team last year with a Heisman candidate quarterback who's back again this year. Who's not back for Arizona? Their entire coaching staff. It's gone up the coast. They're now at Washington. I think you rebound with a win over a ranked Arizona team. You go into your first bye week with just the 1 loss. Come out of that, you got to play on the road at Arizona State, one of the worst teams in the Pac-12 last year. I don't see them getting much better this year. Herm Edwards destroyed that program, or what was left of it. I think you get another win. Make it through the first half of the season with just the 1 loss on the road at Oklahoma State. If that game was played in Utah, I'd pick Utah to win. And look, Utah can beat Oklahoma State, no question about it. You can hate on me in the comments if you want. It's hard to go undefeated, okay? You may even be favored on the road at Oklahoma State, depending on how the first 3 weeks of the season go. And of course, you can beat them. I'm giving them the nod because it's played there. Interesting, though, Whittingham versus Gundy. We'll see who comes out on top in that one. Going on to the second half of the season, you host TCU. Disappointing season last year after making the national title game the year before. I just don't think they ever really, that was like a generational season for TCU. And I just, to expect them to be anything close to that coming out of that was maybe asking a little bit too much. So do I think they will be as good as they were in 2022? No. Do I think they'll be as bad as they were last year in 2023? No, I think they'll be somewhere in between. But you get them at home. This should be a win. I'm giving the win to Utah there. On the road at Houston. A disappointing team last year, and unfortunately, I think they're trending in that direction again this year. I'm not expecting a whole lot out of Houston. I think they have the next to the last worst odds in the Big 12 in terms of winning it. I just don't think they're going to be very good. It is on the road, but I think you get a win there. You go into your second bye week still with just the 1 loss. Come out of that, and this is a tough 4 stretch of games, and I'll just tell you, I don't think you're winning all 4 of these games in a row. BYU, at Colorado, home against Iowa State, on the road at Central Florida. I don't think you're winning all 4 of those. I think your goal should be to go 3-1. If you go 3-1, you're going to be sitting at 10-2 at the end of the year, and that is most likely good enough to get you into the Big 12 title game. And you have to remember, we need to change our mindsets a little bit as college football fans and viewers in terms of what we see in the regular season and thinking, oh my God, we got to go undefeated. We got to go 11-1. If we lose 2 games, you can lose 2 games and get in the playoffs. Okay. The number one priority should be to win your conference because that automatically gets you in. But 1B should be to go 10-2 or better. If you are 10-2 or better, even if you don't make it to your conference title game and you're sitting there at 10-2, you're more likely to get into the 12-team playoff than not. So I think you're going to lose on the road at Oklahoma State, but let's just say you lose any other one game before that second bye week, right? Heading into that final 4-game stretch. Any one game, then you got to go 3-1 down the stretch here in that final 4. You start with BYU at home. I think they're going to be terrible this year. I think you beat them. I don't think it'll be close. I think that's a blowout win. On the road at Colorado. Colorado's an interesting team. They've got some supremely talented players. The problem is they don't have enough of them, right? Shedeur Sanders is really good. Travis Hunter is really good. They've got a couple of good wide receivers. They've got a couple of good DBs. I'm not sold still on their lines of scrimmage, and losing that running back is a huge, huge deal. He transferred to Kansas State. Dylan Edwards, I believe was his name. I thought he was really, really good. Losing him is going to hurt. I don't think they have a replacement for him. And the issue with Colorado, in my opinion, is going to be very similar to last year. The lines of scrimmage and breakdowns in the second half of the season due to attrition and injury. If you had to play on the road at Colorado in week 1, 2, or 3, I think there's a very good chance Colorado could win the game. Having to play them late in the year is an advantage for Utah. Utah's a team that gets better as the year goes along. I don't think that's the case with Colorado. I actually think you go on the road and beat Colorado. And then we've got Iowa State and Central Florida. So I've got to decide basically which 2 of these games I think you're going to lose. Do I think you're better than Iowa State? Yes. Do I think you're better than Central Florida? Yes. I think you're better than Oklahoma State. I think you're better than every team on this schedule. But it's just hard to go 12-0. Almost every team in the country every single year loses at least one game that they're not supposed to lose. I think you're going to lose one of these last 2. And since Central Florida is the road game, that's the one I'm going to go with. I think you lose that final game of the season on the road at Central Florida. No one is talking about Central Florida outside of the state of Florida. But I think my old buddy Goose Malzoon, the head coach down there, I think he might be cooking up a surprise for this season. People always want to know who's your surprise picks or surprise teams for any given year. I'm not saying Central Florida is good enough to win a national title or even make the playoffs, but they might be good enough to decide who gets in or doesn't get in to the Big 12 title game. I would not be shocked at all to see UCF pull off a couple of upsets this year. I'm going to call this one here. I think you lose the final game of the regular season on the road at Central Florida. If I'm right, that will put you at 10-2 with 2 conference losses. Given how wide open the Big 12 is, I think you will still get into the conference title game at 10-2. So there it is. I've got Utah at 10-2, most likely making the Big 12 title game against, if I had to guess right now, Kansas State, maybe Oklahoma State or Central Florida. It really is wide open. But I've got Utah at 10-2. Be sure and let me know down below what you think about these predictions. If you disagree, look, let me know. But don't just tell me I'm wrong. You know, how many games do you think they're going to lose, and which teams do you think they're going to lose? It's one thing to look at the schedule and go, yeah, it looks like 10-2. That's one thing. But to pick out the exact 2 losses, that's something else altogether. Anyway, let me know down below what pisses you off, and I'll talk to you soon. Have a good morning.